Hello and welcome back to Mastering Flat Design. In this lesson we're going to get started on the final section of our design, which is going to be the footer. And it looks like we need to make our site a little bit taller than it currently is in order to make room for that. So we're going to go up to the image menu. We're going to go to canvas size and we're going to make it a little taller, and make sure that when you do this, we want to change the current anchor point. Right now it's set to the center. So if we make this larger, it's going to expand out in all directions, left, right, up, and down. Well, we just want it to expand downward. So I'm going to click in the top middle square here so that when we make this taller by increasing the height here, it will only increase downward. So we're going to take the height and let's bring it up to 1500. We won't need it quite that tall, but it'll be easier to crop it once we're done. So once we've entered in 1500 for the height, we'll click on OK, and it expands downward. Now we just need to expand the background downward, so we can just right click and select the background layer there. And once that background layer is selected, I'm just going to eyedropper that background color, click on OK, and then use the keyboard shortcut Option Delete on a Mac or Alt Backspace on a PC to fill the rest of the background with that color. So then we'll scroll back up and there we go. So we're going to create our final section, the footer, up here. And let's turn on our guides, Command H or Control H on a PC. And we're going to, this footer is actually going to have 3 columns to it. So it needs to be set up a little bit differently than our current setup. And we can create a 3-column setup very easily using a plugin called Guide. And you can find that plugin if you don't already have it. If we jump into Chrome here, you can find it at guide.me, and it's just a plugin that gives you another panel to work with in Photoshop. And once you have that installed, you can open it up here. Here's the guide panel, and we can enter in our own values here for our columns and our margins and things like that. So what I want to do is I want to keep the 100 pixel margins on the left and right and create a 3-column setup within the rest of the file. So the way we do that is we come over here to the text box for the left margin, and I'm going to type in 100 for 100 pixels. For the right margin, we'll type 100 again, and that will create a guide 100 pixels from the right edge of the stage, which we've already got. We already have that guide there, but we need to include these margins if we want to get the guides set up properly for our 3 columns. So you'll notice if we hover over each of these, it gives us a hint of what goes in this particular section. And all we need to fill in here is the number of columns, and it's going to be 3. And then for the column gutter, I'm not going to enter anything. The gutter is the spacing between columns. So if you wanted spacing, you could enter in a value of something like 20 pixels or something like that. But I don't want spacing here. Instead, I'm going to put some padding on the inside of those columns. But with our 3 values entered in, we're just going to click in one of those text fields where we entered them in and just hit the Enter key on the numeric keyboard, and you'll see that it creates extra columns for our 3-column setup. Now, one thing that doesn't really make a huge difference, but just want to point out that it's there, is that it did create another guide on top of the current guide we had for our left and right margins. So we can grab this guide here, for example, and drag it off, and you'll notice that there's still one there. And we can do the same thing for the one on the far right. We'll drag that off, and there's still a guide there. Now, it doesn't really matter if you have one on top of the other. They probably won't really conflict with each other, but I went ahead and got rid of it anyways. So now that we've got our column set up, let's go ahead and put a background on our footer. Now, our footer obviously is not going to be this tall. I just wanted to make it taller than necessary. And once we're done filling in the content, we'll crop our file. But I want to start by creating a rectangle. So we'll go to the rectangle tool. I'm going to turn off the stroke. And for the fill color, we're going to choose a value of ED, which is a lighter gray than the background color we're using for our site. And then once we've got that selected, we'll just click up here and drag down and to the right, making sure that we don't cover up the margins, just the content area. V to switch to the move tool, Command H to turn off our guides, and there we go. That's the background color we're going to be using. Now I'm seeing a slight issue. If we zoom in here, you'll see that our darker green background isn't coming all the way over to the edge. So I'm going to grab that dark green background here and just nudge it over 1 pixel, and that should take care of it. And it does, and we'll make sure there's not any empty pixels in between the 2 green backgrounds, and there's not. Everything looks good there, so we're good to go. All right, so we have this background layer here for our footer. So let's make sure it's not inside any other folders, and it's not. So we'll drag this up just below the main content folder and then put it inside a group called footer. So now we have a footer group, and the only item within that group is this rectangle background. So let's rename that layer footer BG. And then in the next video, we'll get started filling in the content for that footer. So let's save our file as flatdesign13.psd, and we'll move on with the next video. Thank you for watching.